of course.
Their shallow draft shape was perfect for storming beaches.
It's amazing to me that nobody else had boats anything like them.
European monarchs confidently believed their inland cities were insulated from the wrath of deep ocean naval warfare. That comforting illusion vanished when massive warships, engineered to survive the violent North Atlantic, began gliding silently through merely 3 feet of shallow river water. This impossible paradox bypassed traditional coastal fortifications, seamlessly paving the way for an unprecedented era of relentless global expansion. The geographic catalyst, forged by the fjords. The terrifying efficiency of the Viking Longship was not born from a desire for aesthetics, but rather from the brutal necessity of an unforgiving and fractured landscape. Scandinavia was a region defined by towering mountain ranges, dense primeval forests, and a jagged coastline that seemed designed to isolate one settlement from the next. For the people living in what we now know as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, the land itself was often a hostile barrier that made overland travel a grueling and nearly impossible endeavor. To survive in such a world, the Norsemen were forced to turn their gaze away from the rocky interior and toward the cold, churning waters of the North Atlantic. This geographic isolation meant that the ocean was not merely a boundary, but the only viable highway for trade, communication, and basic survival. Because every major settlement was punctuated by deep, narrow fjords that cut miles into the mainland, the sea became the primary connective tissue of their entire society. The unique pressures of this environment demanded a vessel that could withstand the crushing swells of the open ocean while remaining nimble enough to navigate the shallow, rocky shallows of the inner coast. They needed a ship that was fast enough to outrun a storm and light enough to be hauled across land when the waterways finally reached an end. By mastering the water out of pure necessity, the Vikings inadvertently created a maritime network that gave them a perspective far broader than their land-bound neighbors to the south. This outward-looking culture fostered an exceptional sense of curiosity and bravery, as every voyage was an experiment in pushing the limits of their architectural capabilities. The Longship was the ultimate culmination of these environmental pressures, representing a perfect synthesis of human ingenuity and the rugged demands of the Scandinavian wilderness. As these vessels evolved, they transformed from simple coastal transport into the most formidable predators to ever strike the European shoreline. The hull that changed naval warfare. The true horror of the Viking Longship did not stem from its sheer size, but rather from a revolutionary architectural design that defied the established laws of naval warfare. While Mediterranean shipbuilders relied on rigid planks placed edge to edge, the Norse shipwrights utilized an ingenious and highly adaptable method known as clinker construction. This specific technique involved taking meticulously carved planks of mature oak and overlapping them along the entire length of the vessel. These overlapping wooden planks were firmly fastened together using heavy iron rivets and meticulously sealed with a mixture of animal hair and thick black tar. This brilliant engineering choice made the ships incredibly watertight, while simultaneously allowing the entire hull to actively twist and flex with the punishing North Atlantic waves. Instead of rigidly fighting against the crushing power of the ocean, the clinker-built Longship essentially breathed and surfed along the volatile surface of the water. However, the most devastating feature of this architectural anatomy was a terrifyingly shallow draft that rendered traditional European coastal defenses completely obsolete. Or a massive Viking warship carrying a crew of 60 fully armed men could comfortably float in less than 1 meter of water without scraping the bottom. This unparalleled buoyancy allowed the Norse raiders to bypass heavily fortified deep-water harbors and sail directly onto the sandy beaches of unsuspecting coastal villages. Furthermore, this shallow draft meant that these ocean-faring predators could seamlessly transition from the open sea to narrow, winding inland river systems. To the absolute bewilderment of their enemies, the Vikings could navigate deep into the heart of a continent where no foreign navy had ever dared to venture. The terrifying reality was that any kingdom with a river connection to the sea was now completely vulnerable to a sudden and devastating amphibious assault. The psychological impact of seeing a fleet of these massive, flexible wooden beasts gliding silently onto a shallow riverbank was enough to break the morale of any standing army. wind, oars, and relentless speed. The horrifying suddenness of a Viking raid relied entirely on a sophisticated hybrid propulsion system that effortlessly married the raw power of the wind with the relentless endurance of human muscle. Prior to the 8th century, these early coastal vessels were primarily driven by oarsmen, which severely limited their capacity to cross the expansive and violent waters of the open ocean. This critical technological limitation vanished entirely with the integration of the massive square sail, a monumental engineering upgrade that transformed the Longship into an unstoppable maritime predator. These enormous sails were meticulously woven from heavy wool and reinforced with thick leather strips, deliberately designed to capture the ferocious gales of the North Sea without tearing apart under the immense pressure. To prevent the towering mast from crushing the flexible wooden hull beneath it, Viking shipwrights introduced the keelson, a massive block of solid oak that perfectly distributed the immense weight across the ship. With the wind swelling the woolen canvas, a fully manned longship could achieve staggering speeds of up to 12 knots, allowing them to outrun any contemporary naval force in Europe with absolute ease. However, the true tactical genius of the longship revealed itself when the howling winds suddenly died down, or when the raiders entered the narrow, winding confines of an inland river system. Up to 30 exhausted but highly disciplined warriors could instantly transition to rowing, sliding their heavy wooden oars through specially designed ports to maneuver with terrifying precision in completely calm weather. This unparalleled versatility meant that a localized storm or a sudden drop in wind speed could never halt a Viking advance, making their relentless campaigns of global conquest almost impossible to anticipate or defend against. Raiders, rivers, and ransoms. The horrifying mechanical advantages of the longship were not merely theoretical concepts, but terrifying realities that brought the most powerful European kingdoms to the brink of absolute collapse. By the middle of the 9th century, these shallow draft vessels had evolved from a coastal nuisance into an apocalyptic force capable of executing deeply coordinated inland sieges. In the fateful year of 845, a massive fleet of longships led by the legendary chieftain Ragnar Lodbrok completely bypassed the coastal defenses of West Francia and sailed directly up the Seine River. Frankish soldiers watched in absolute disbelief as an armada of painted wooden dragons glided effortlessly through the continental interior, dropping a highly disciplined army right at the vulnerable gates of Paris. King Charles the Bald quickly realized that his traditional mounted troops could never match the terrifying speed and amphibious mobility of the Viking invaders. To save his capital city from complete annihilation, the desperate monarch was forced to pay a staggering ransom of 7,000 pounds of solid silver just to make the Norsemen leave. However, the exact same terrifying warships that systematically dismantled European fortifications were simultaneously responsible for building one of the most extensive and lucrative global trade networks of the medieval era. Instead of merely pillaging and burning every settlement they encountered, the pragmatic Norse navigators established sprawling economic hubs in major trading centers like Hedeby, Birka, and Novgorod. The very cargo holds that once carried stolen plunder and heavily armed warriors were soon packed with highly sought-after northern commodities such as Baltic amber, thick animal furs, and walrus ivory. These merchants sailed their resilient vessels down the sprawling Dnieper and Volga river systems, pushing the absolute boundaries of their influence all the way to the vibrant markets of Baghdad and the golden gates of the Byzantine Empire. Some Norsemen even entered the direct service of the Byzantine emperor as the elite Varangian Guard, demonstrating how deeply their maritime mobility had integrated them into foreign political structures. In exchange for their valuable northern goods, the Vikings returned home with exotic spices, heavy woven silks, and shining silver dirhams from the Islamic world. This unprecedented global reach proved that their magnificent ships were just as effective for building a mercantile empire as they were for waging an unpredictable coastal war. The final twist. The sheer mechanical brilliance of the clinker-built longship would have been completely useless without the ability to accurately navigate out of sight of a familiar coastline. While other medieval sailors desperately hugged the safety of the shore, the Vikings confidently crossed the blinding expanse of the open North Atlantic using sophisticated sensory wayfinding. To maintain a consistent heading during the brightest parts of the day, these master navigators relied upon a specially carved wooden disc known as a sun compass. However, when the impenetrable northern fogs rolled in to obscure the sky, they utilized specialized polarized crystals called sunstones that could precisely pinpoint the exact location of the hidden sun. Beyond these remarkable navigational feats, the Vikings fundamentally understood that the Longship was a devastating instrument of psychological warfare designed to break an enemy before a single sword was swung. The terrifying carved dragon heads mounted on the prow were meticulously crafted to terrify human targets and frighten away the protective guardian spirits of the coastlines they were relentlessly attacking. Yet, the ultimate twist to this reign of maritime terror lies in a fascinating internal superstition that perfectly reveals the deep spiritual vulnerability of the Norsemen themselves. Before returning to the safety of their home fjords, the victorious raiders would completely dismantle and hide these monstrous wooden visages to avoid offending their own local land spirits. This remarkable historical detail proves that the brilliant creators of the most terrifying vessel in history were just as frightened of its supernatural implications as the victims they conquered. The Viking Longship was more than a weapon. It was a machine of adaptation that turned geography into power and changed the shape of medieval history. If you want more stories like this, where engineering, war, and human ingenuity collide, subscribe and join us on the next expedition.